Hi, everyone. It's Mary Beth Shewan here with Erin Littlestar. Hi, Erin. I think they'll see you in a moment. Here's another conversation with a wonderful entrepreneurial woman. And we're going to go through a lot of different things about mindset and tips for you. And I'm really, really pleased to have Erin Littlestar with me today. Hi, Erin. Welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for coming. Um, I always like to start with people's stories, Erin. So just tell us a little bit about like you were working and then you decided to be an entrepreneur. Tell us a little bit about how that occurred.
Yeah. Um, I was, graduated from college, it's like as you do, got out into the world, and started just working, started working at jobs. Thankfully, I had some great jobs, and worked in nonprofit, worked in restaurant corporations. I was doing a lot of work in sustainable agriculture and local food systems, and I was super passionate about it. And I thought that that was going to be my whole life, and I was going to devote my entire life to that exclusively. And then I got fired. I got fired from my dream job, where I was a 26-year-old executive director of a new nonprofit that I was starting. The founder and I had a falling out, and he fired me, and I was devastated. I had no idea what to do from there, because that had been my whole dream, right? Like that my whole life and dream felt like it was wrapped up in this job. And when it was taken away from me, I really didn't know what to do. I had just bought a house, I had a mortgage. I was kind of thrown out into the ocean on my own, um, and felt like I couldn't go back into that world. I had all this shame about being fired, and then really not feeling like I could stay, and I needed to do something different. So I let myself sit with it for a little while, and actually kind of accidentally started my own business at that point. And I'd always known that I kind of had that entrepreneurial spirit. I've never been a great employee, to be honest. I can see why I've been fired multiple times. I have way too many ideas and too many plans for the future and how to make systems better. And usually bosses really just want you to do the job that they've told you to do. And so I kind of had to invent my own job. I really invented my own career path. And once I had that freedom, even though it was a scary freedom at first, of really not knowing how I was going to make ends meet, not knowing how I was going to pay my mortgage and all of that, once I started to put the pieces together, I realized I wasn't going to be able to go back. I couldn't go back to a 9-to-5 job after that. And just to be perfectly transparent, a lot of the ways that I made money in the beginning it was the very early days of Airbnb, and my house that I had bought in DC had this kind of separate basement apartment. And so I would rent that out, and then I would go sleep on friends' couches and rent my house out to pay my mortgage. And so I really had to get creative with how I was making money while I was figuring out what kind of meaningful work I wanted to do. And that has really been a theme throughout my life. There are ways I make money, and there are ways that I figure out how to do meaningful work. And sometimes they are exactly the same thing, and sometimes they are many things. And I think that that is often the way of entrepreneurs, and people who run their own business, is that sometimes we just are doing the thing that makes our, lights our soul on fire. And also there are other ways that we're kind of figuring out how to make money and how to support our dreams. So, and yeah, years after that, once I kind of had that idea of wanting to change people's lives through coaching, it led me to opening up the Perline, which was my women's social and business club in Portland, Oregon. And that was my new dream, and I had this huge dream that I opened there, and it was amazing. And then COVID hit. So there's been a lot of reinvention over the course of my path. That's been very winding. But it has always been so fulfilling to know that I am the one responsible for creating, the life that I want, and that I have the ability and the freedom to do that just because I say so.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And I should say that Erin's in Italy and the internet's a little slow, so it might hiccup once in a while, but it's okay. It's okay. We're good. You can still understand what's happening. I want to talk about times when you were stuck and like what your experience of that was and how did you get out of it? How do you know like this is something that has to change right now?
Yeah, I have had that feeling so many times in my life, because I think I have reinvented myself again and again and again, and had big dreams that I created into reality, and then they became my nightmare. And I think that that's something that not enough people talk about, is that you will have more than one dream over the course of your life, and more than one idea and thing that you want to create. And they don't always last forever. They will not all last forever. Just like a good relationship can be 5 years long, and that's it. It doesn't always have to last, until the day you die. And I think the same is true of businesses and creative dreams that you have. I have had that feeling of stuckness so many times when I have created something amazing and it has started to run its course, but I keep pushing.
Mm.
Like my intuition tells me that like it's time for it to be done, but that other part of me says, no, you put too much time, too much money, too much energy into this, you can't leave. And eventually it feels like I'm trapped. It starts to feel like I'm trapped inside of my own cage of my own making. I'm trapped by the choices that I made to get here, or times when I felt like I was trapped in an obligation, or trapped in a job, or trapped in those kinds of situations because I said yes one time. I could never make a different choice. And when I know that I'm really stuck, I get really angry. Like that's my sign. Like if I'm waking up every morning and I am angry about having to go to work, about having to go do the thing that I said I wanted to do, then I know that I have trapped myself. And then in that feeling of stuckness, it sucks. It's
Yeah.
just the worst place to be. It's the worst feeling because it really feels real, and it's not actually, but it
Yeah.
feels so real and so icky. So yeah, I mean, I just had that experience. I'm in Italy right now, living out my dream, and came to do this ceramics course here. And it was not what I wanted it to be. It was not as good as it should have been. And I felt like I had put all of this money and time into it. And I was really angry about it. And I feel like I had texted you because I didn't know what else to do. And I felt so stuck. And you were just like, what's bringing you joy? Go after that. And I was like, oh yeah, it's actually really simple. There's no joy in this for me. I'm angry every day. And I don't know exactly what else is going to bring me joy, but I know that's not it. So I'm just going to say no and quit and just be done and just let that go. And it's been immensely better ever since. And now there is so much more joy that I'm going after. Like sometimes it's one simple choice away. It's just one no thank you away.
Yeah, I'm happy to remind you of that. I think I mean, we all need it, right? From time to time when we're in that space. And I just want to say, to that whole piece about this emotional storm that we get in, and I've also experienced it multiple times where I've said yes to things that I maybe shouldn't have. And then the obligation to follow through, and you do your best with it, but it starts to feel heavier and heavier and heavier. And really, it's this piece about our brains really don't have access to more effective states of being when we're feeling frustrated and angry and hopeless, or all these things that people are experiencing. And so, always I start with the mindset for people, because if you can't uh, like wake up your brain to a higher state, into more courage and innovation and synchronicities, if you can't sort of pick your head up, it's really hard to figure out, like, what do I do? So always starting with self-care, always coming back to, like, what do you need to be true to yourself, your values, who you truly are in the world. It's so important as you're making these decisions. And then usually it's a no thank you to this, and I'm going to embrace this. And you can at least take a step or two. I think it's really great also the way that you have reinvented yourself, and how we talked about it's just the next chapter of your life. It doesn't have to be forever, right? This is a choice that you're making. I want you to talk a little bit about, you're a super businesswoman. You've killed it in many businesses already. And then always there was this artistic, creative, spiritual aspect to you that maybe didn't get as much airtime. Can you talk about how you've experienced that back and forth in yourself? Because I think a lot of people have these different voices kind of competing for what they do.
Yeah, definitely. When I started the Perline, that was probably about 6 years ago now, I think. And it was really deep in the heart of that, like, girl boss, like boss babe, hustle culture, like, millennial pink everything. And like, I love me some millennial pink, but that idea really became so damaging for me, because I started this business that was based purely on the desire to bring women together, to help each other, to form friendships, to hire each other, to just be in loving, supportive community together. And it turned into this kind of constant push for more, like that we had to grow, we had to get bigger. It was never enough. Nothing ever felt like it was enough inside of that. And so this part of me that does love business, that like loves spreadsheets and loves making big goals and loves going after them, and loves creating meaningful things in the world that also generate money. That part of me was really kind of on hyperdrive, to the point where it became more important to grow and to look good than it did to actually be satisfied inside of myself and my own business. And I think a lot of people who were also in that, I have a lot of friends who also have kind of, since COVID, I think, since we all were sort of forced to stop, have kind of extracted themselves from this girl boss culture, and realizing that it's not actually healthy. Like, of course we can run our own businesses. It's like, at this point, it's kind of a duh. Like, I don't need to like have a sign on my desk that says boss babe. Like, obviously I'm an entrepreneur and I can do whatever I want. But this kind of competition that got created, and this false sense of like making 7 figures in your first year, was just crazy. And it really kind of drove me to the brink of insanity, I think, because there was this other part of me that was this very like soft, spiritual, artistic self that was like, who cares about money? Like, I just want to make beautiful things, and I just want to have deep conversations with people. And that part of me was just getting no airtime whatsoever. So when I closed the Perline and sold the business, and really had to start over, that part of me started to emerge. And she was like, hey, remember me? I've been here all along, just like waiting for you to be ready. And so I really made the conscious choice to just give her a lot of airtime and say, okay, you know what? Actually, this other part of me has been running the show for the last 4 or 5 years, maybe 30 years. um, let's give you some airtime. And what do you want? And she wanted to make pottery. She wanted to make ceramics. She wanted to play with her hands, and to make beautiful things in a different way. And so that's what I've been doing. And I started by taking a pottery class, and it was like it immediately filled me in a way that nothing else had in a long time, to be able to just take a piece of earth and create something everlasting from it. It was incredible. And I just have decided to devote my whole life to this now, basically, and see where it goes. And it doesn't mean that I've shut down this other part of me forever. She's just kind of in the backseat now. She's just not driving anymore. She's still there offering directions when needed, but now I'm just really allowing this other part of me to live and thrive, because she never was able to, because I didn't think that I was allowed to in this kind of hyper capitalistic world, where I thought I had to prove myself and like show that I was like as good as the boys. And then one day I woke up and I was like, yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm good. Like, I don't have to prove anything. And I certainly don't need to compete with anybody like that. So yeah, just really allowing all of those parts of me to thrive has been huge. And I feel this sense of peace and wholeness that I think I was missing for a really long time.
It's beautiful. Yeah, really beautiful. I love the way you're sharing that. Um, the other piece I want to talk to you about, because I think we both are good at it, and then not good at it, and good at it and not good at it. And that is like the intuition and sort of finding the flow. It's the opposite of the girl boss thing, right? And I think there's so much pressure, like you said, to like in a year, everything is great. And it just doesn't work like that. I mean, great if it does for you, like maybe you hit on an idea and it takes off right away, but it's really more every day doing things for your business, making sure that you're helping people and educate. For me, it's educating people about what it really takes to make it successful. And those little intuitions about yes or no, or wait and see kind of feelings, like how do you see that in terms of business for women?
Oof, I think it's so, so critical. I can look back now, of course, in hindsight, and see many different points at which I absolutely knew that it was time to make a change and didn't, and was afraid to. Um, and Even in the like growth, when I was moving the Perline into a new space, we were taking on this much more expensive, much bigger space, building it out from scratch, which was really fun. It was a great time. And we created something really amazing, and it was a great experience for me. However, it also coincided with the start of COVID lockdowns, right when we opened. And I had known, like I had that feeling right before I made that decision and signed the paperwork, that like something bad was going to happen. And I didn't listen. And it was like, maybe it's enough. Maybe you could just be done. The lease was running out in the old space. Like maybe this was just a beautiful thing that we did for 3 years, and that's okay. And it's okay to just let go and not know what's coming next. And I just doubled down instead and was like, no, I'm not done. I'm squeezing more juice out of this thing. We're moving forward. We're charging on. We're going to be bigger and better than ever. But there was that part of me that knew, and I just didn't listen. And it ended up working out fine in the end, because I really believe that the universe is on your side. And even when you don't listen, it eventually comes back around when you do. And the next time I had that massive like hit of intuition from the universe, it was like, it's time. You're done. Like this is it. You have to be done. Even if, in my mind at the time, like even if it left me in debt for the rest of my life, I was like, okay, yeah, we have to be done. And it ended up very magically working out, and I ended up selling it and And it was this kind of really beautiful, magical moment where everybody could kind of like move on and in a new way. But it was really trusting that like it was going to be okay, even if it didn't look okay, even if it didn't feel okay right away, it was going to be okay. And I had to make that decision for my own well-being, really. Like at that point, it was just tearing me apart, you know. And so that was such a good lesson every time, you know, since that I have felt that like it's time, you know, or like the strong yes, or the strong no, or the strong wait. You know, and really making sure that I ask myself and I listen before I make those big leaps. Because I keep finding out that like it's always right. It's always right. Even when I hear it and I don't listen, I find out later, you know, it's always right. And it's not always the easy choice to make. You know, it's not the logical choice a lot of times. Rarely actually is it the one probably that other people advise you to make. But if you know that it's time to quit, that it's time to start over, you know, that it's time to make the jump, that, you know, and you don't know how it's going to go on the other end, like know that like the universe has it worked out. Like you wouldn't be getting that if it wasn't already worked out for you. And it might not work out exactly the way that you think it's going to, but man, like there is just so many more possibilities out there than we can even imagine. And, you know, I could never have imagined that, you know, shutting down the Perline when I did and moving on would result in moving to Hawaii and like finding my dream home and like being and starting this whole new life in Hawaii. That it would, that like absolutely called to me, and like that all of these doors just kept opening. That was like, this is the right path. This is the right path. This is where you're supposed to be. Here you go. And I could not have created that for myself, just like, you know, in my own imagination, if I had not made that choice. And I felt so stuck like that. It felt like it was the end of the world. It did not feel good to make that choice. But what was on the other side of it was just more than I could have ever imagined. And now I'm living in Italy for 6 months just because I want to. You know, there's so much more out there than we can even imagine for ourselves in those moments of stuckness. You know, there's millions of possibilities for your life that you cannot see when you feel like you are trapped inside of your own choices. So sometimes you just have to say, I don't know where I'm going, but it's not here anymore. I have to leave this, and then I'll be able to see, you know, what else is out there.
Super. I love the way that you spoke about that. I think, you know, it takes a lot of courage to take responsibility for something you've created, and also to separate out all these other voices, because everyone always wants to tell you the best thing to do, right? And so, you know, finding that space really, however you do contemplation or inquiry for yourself, to really feel like, what is it that I need? What do I want? Because at the end of the day, you're the one who did sign the lease, right? Who has responsibility for it. So, okay, then if it's not that, then we'll move on to something else, and really paying attention inside. And it's not easy. It's really not an easy one. So not only do we have those outside voices, but also in our own self, like you were saying, it's hard to quit things. We think, oh no, I started this, I'm going to let people down. I'm going to, you know, all these different things. But really, if it's not in alignment, it's so draining all the time when we're moving forward in those things. And I think, wow, I could be using that energy for something else. No problem. It's just not for me, right? There's not a right or wrong kind of situation there. This has been great, Erin. Talk a little bit about where you are now and what you're up to.
Yeah, where am I now? Yeah, so a year and a half ago or so, I ended up in Hawaii, and found this beautiful house there, that was in need of some love and care and renovation. This beautiful mid-century house that needed some caretaking. And that has just been such a dream. Fell in love And we've been fixing up that house together. And then really, I decided about 5, 6 months ago to do the ceramics program, to like really focus on the ceramics and like really just let that be what, I don't know, I just kind of just like really let myself be fully immersed in it, really. And so I moved to Italy for 6 months. And my love came with me, and my dog. And so now we've been living in Florence, Italy for the last 4 or 5 months. And we're headed back to Hawaii in January. And it also has been hard. There have been things here that have not been perfect and all worked out. It's not like you make one choice and then life's a dream after. But again, times I didn't listen to my intuition. And then when I did, and then had to make this choice to, to like leave this program and do something else. And I found some amazing ways to, to dig into my like love of ceramics and making pottery since then. And yeah, so we're just kind of living day by day here, and actually just enjoying living in Italy right now, which is really wonderful. It's I could feel that part of me that really wanted to be super ambitious about this taking over, and I think that maybe that's a big part of stepping back from this, is just allowing myself to just be slower still, and to just be very, very slow and intentional, and not try to like learn absolutely everything that I can all at once and dig into it the way that I used to do things. But I think it's this sort of forced slowdown to be more intentional about however I move forward from here. So yeah, right now, just kind of enjoying the end of the year, enjoying fall in Florence, which I really feel like is her best season. And yeah, and then, when I move back to Hawaii in, a couple of months, then we'll really, I'll really start focusing on like, doing the ceramics and figuring out what's next for that. But I don't really have to rush anymore. I think I've sort of forced myself to slow down here, and I'm really grateful for the time to just be more intentional about what comes next, and just actually finding small everyday joy in my life of just living here, and being in my relationship, and eating a lot of really delicious Italian food. That's really what my life is about right now, is like eating a lot of good food and enjoying my days. So,
It's so great because I know you had this dream to move to Italy for a long time and spend
yeah,
time here. So it's so great that we're on the same continent. And I also have to say, as an American living in Europe, it's such a different focus. There's much more of a feeling of quality of life and relationships, and how important that is to people. And
yeah.
it's something I felt like I was really missing in the US. So, um,
Yeah, I think that that's the thing. I think that that's one of the big things that drew me to Hawaii too, was that it's very similar there, that like our life is really about like joy, and just kind of like being together with friends and having that slower life. And it doesn't always take a huge shift of location to make that happen. But for me, who was very, very stuck in that kind of hustle and ambition, it was really important for me to be surrounded by cultures that were differently focused. And that has been super, super important and valuable. So I think being able to, if you can, that is something, like finding a culture and a people and a community that also really reinforce the values that you want to be living is really important. So as difficult it is to be living in a totally new place, I think for both of us, it's been a really good shift, even though challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can relate to the whole thing. I've been to Hawaii many times where you live, and coming from New York, where it was super type A, like I grew up just with all the intellectual push and stimulation, great, but same thing. There was a part of me that was just like more dramatic and playful and fun and creative and spiritual. And I just didn't get a lot of attention to that part of myself. And the farther I moved out west over my life, the more that part of me came out. So it's
Yeah.
really great. And yeah, for sure, there's challenges no matter what you do. It's never just sunshine and roses. It's great to live overseas. And wow, has it been,
Yeah, and it's really hard.
yeah, probably the two toughest years of my life. Of course, because I moved here at the beginning of COVID. So it happens. It's okay. I learned a whole lot about myself, which is always, a gift. And I think that that's something I keep coming back to over and over again. For some reason, I've been thinking about my nieces and nephew and like really the self-acceptance. What we're really speaking to is like accept whatever is in yourself, be in agreement with yourself. That's when life is really sweet. Whether you're staying in a job, leaving the job, starting a business, ending a business, moving on, find that resonance within yourself so that you can really shine in the world and make the difference that you came to make. Really, ultimately, we all want to create this meaning and purpose in our lives. And it does, for me at least, seem like the more I slow down, the clearer that picture emerges. I wonder
Yeah.
how you feel about that.
Yeah, definitely. I feel that same way. Because I know that I'm super capable of just like holding on for dear life and like forcing something to happen and like grinding, until I get there. But it's really it's not the way I want to be. It's not the person I want to be. There's a time and a place for that in emergency situations, but most of life is not an emergency. And really choosing that more intentional life. Most of my life now is, and I can look back and see that I have been moving towards that all along, is really just finding out who I am. That life is not about a job. Life is not about life is not even about your meaningful work in the world. That it's really about becoming the person that you are meant to becoming the person that you want to become. And hopefully that all of those other things in your life align with that, with where you live and what you do and how you make money and what difference you make for people in your relationships and all of those things. But that the core of your life, the kind of guiding light, be this: who are you becoming? Who are you at the end of the day, at the end of your life? Like, have you really honored all of these different facets of yourself and really come into your wholeness as a person? And for me, that has looked like having lots of different kinds of jobs and living lots of different places and having lots of different kinds of relationships with people. Because through all of that, I was learning who I was and I was becoming who I want to be. And who I think I'm just ultimately am, and just sort of peeling off the layers and getting back to who you really are. But I think that's been the most important thing for me to remember, is that there are no good experiences or bad experiences. It's just, are they teaching me something about who I am, at my core? And are there more things that I can do in my life because I want to know who I am in that situation? I want to know who I am as an artist. I want to know who I am as someone who, lives in Italy for 6 months. I want to know who I am as, someone who, learns how to renovate her house by herself. And, really just kind of collecting all of these things about me. And that has really built my life. And I think that is going to continue to build my life. And make a satisfying life for me, because ultimately I'm just becoming the person that I want to be.
Well said, Erin. Thank you so much for being with me today. This has been a joy. I hope you all enjoyed it as well. And I'll put some contact information for Erin in the bottom of our description. Be well.
Thank you so
Happy
much.
holidays. Happy New Year.
I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.